Hello, Patriots. Welcome back to a new episode of Principled. Today's title is The Weekend of Horror. So, in this episode, we will be covering the recent tragedies that have seemed to sort of plague our country as of recently, such as the Bondi Beach attack, which that was in our country, that was in Australia. The Brown University shooting, which has a direct connection to the MIT professor who was also murdered. We will close it off with the Rainer murders. That will be the last thing we will cover. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's tune to the intro.
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith.
One thing that's hit a lot of those young Americans over the last week was how Charlie was there for them when others were not.
Because we're Americans, and we're not going to be deterred. Charlie's voice is not silent. We're going to pick up that bloodstained microphone where Charlie left it.
Watch the news machine spin up again and make us all believe that he deserved what came to him. Am I the only one who's crawling in my skin?
Okay, Patriots, so let's dig right into it. So, today we will start off with the Australian attack at Bondi Beach. So, I think it was sometime this last weekend. There was a Hanukkah celebration for Jewish people in Australia down at Bondi Beach when, like, an Islamic immigrant, which was a father and son duo, they came into the beach and they started opening fire upon the Jewish people who were celebrating their Hanukkah, which clearly, seen as they were immigrants from Islamic immigrants, is what I've heard at least. Clearly, this was an attack rooted in anti-Semitism. So, for starters, just horrible situation. And soon after, a bystander was able to sneak up on, I believe it was the father out of the two gunmen, and was able to tackle him and disarm him. But while he was doing it, the son, who was on a bridge, proceeded to shoot him a few times. So they did sustain injury, but the bystander, the hero, was able to live, and they sustained the father. But the other shooter, the son, who was on the bridge, shortly after was soon killed by the police, who it seemed like had a pretty poor response to the whole situation, all things considered. It seemed like there was a slow reaction, like the response time between the cops being called and them getting there seemed like they didn't take it too seriously, and it took them a while to get there, which is very concerning, seeming as Australia does have decently strict gun laws, all things considered. They really don't like guns over there, which brings up the point that if a place like Australia, which is very democratic, and they have like gun laws, like pretty much it's hard to get guns over there. So for specifically an immigrant, family like father and son duo to uphold guns there and still commit this violence is a little weird. You know what I'm saying? And just it's a whole weird situation. The police took forever to get there. It was just not a good situation overall. And a lot of people, there's 12 dead, and at least 12 dead. And there was other people, of course, trying to stop them, but none did, apart from that one bystander who did end up disarming the father. But even he was still shot a few times. So this next thing, I'm gonna tune to a video of the bystander who tackled. It's just gonna be a little video of the bystander tackling the father, who was one of the perpetrators within.
And it appears that you see coming from around the car, seems to tackle the gunman there. And then as it goes, he's sort of holding them off. And then just off to the right of your screen, there is apparently another of the attackers that.
Next, I will tune to a clip of the son who was on the bridge where he was shooting from. So get ready. I'm going to tune to that right now.
The shooter firing on Australians, Jews celebrating Hanukkah on the beach, firing on them. And
Okay, Patriots, so now it's time for the next topic. So our next topic will be the Brown University shooting, which now in the past videos, specifically yesterday, we have found out has had a connection to the MIT professor who was also sadly killed this week as well, which causes just the whole death toll of the situation just to keep going up. Okay, to start off, I don't know the full story of what happened. I will show a news clip of like a press conference kind of detailing the whole thing. But we just found out who the shooter was. There's a manhunt for a while. They did have a suspect, but it didn't turn out to be them. But they now have turned up that they found out it happens to be Claudio Manuel Neves Valentine. And there should be an image of him up on the screen. So, with that being said, I'm just going to play this video clip of kind of them speaking about it, and then I myself will go into more of a discussion about it. But otherwise, let's tune to this news clip.
Information that led us to today's search of the storage locker in New Hampshire. This is what we learned during this multi-jurisdictional investigation. Neves Valente studied at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island on an F1 visa around 2000 to 2021. He eventually obtained legal permanent resident status. Previously, he attended the same academic program as the MIT professor Nuno Loureiro in Portugal between 1995 and 2000. Although Neves Valente appeared to reside in Florida, between November 26 and November 30 of this year, he rented a hotel room in Boston. On December 1st, he rented a gray Nissan Sentra with Florida plates from a car rental agency in Boston. That same day, he drove to the vicinity of Brown University, where his car was observed intermittently between December 1st and December 12th. On December 13th, Neves Valente entered an auditorium on Brown University's campus during a study session and began shooting at students, killing Ella Cook and Mohammed Aziz Umarzokov and injuring 9 others. Between December 13th and December 14th, Neves Valente returned to Massachusetts. On December 15th, he murdered MIT professor Nuno Loureiro at Loureiro's home in Brookline, Massachusetts. At some point while he was in Massachusetts, he switched the plates on the Nissan Sentra to an unregistered plate out of Maine. Immediately following Professor Loureiro's murder, Neves Valente drove to a storage facility in Salem, New Hampshire, where he had rented a storage unit in November of this year. Since the December 13th shootings at Brown and the December 15th shooting in Brookline, state, local, and federal law enforcement officials have been working hand in hand around the clock to identify the shooter and prevent him from inflicting further harm. I have said this before and will continue to believe when law enforcement agencies work together, crimes are solved and the public is protected. The information we provided to you tonight would not be possible without the dedicated men and women of law enforcement in multiple districts throughout New England, including the FBI, ATF, HSI, the U.S. Marshal Service, Massachusetts State Police, Rhode Island State Police, Providence Police, Brookline Police, and the Brown University Police. In addition, prosecutors for the Rhode Island Attorney General's Office and the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office and federal prosecutors from Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts all contributed to this result. I also want to thank Attorney General Pam Bondi for her support in coordinating the federal response.
Okay, so now with all that information now being out there, we can kind of go into more depth about the situation. So, as stated, Neves Valentine did have a history at Brown University. It sounds like he came in on a visa, to learn education, and the MIT professor that he killed, it sounds like did have involvement. Like they both went to Brown, and they both moved to Massachusetts. And it sounds like he kind of went to Florida there for a little bit, and then randomly one day. It sounds like we don't have much of a motive. It just sounds like one day, for whatever reason, he came back to Brown University and he killed the two poor young college students, Ella Cook and the other young man whose name I will not say because I do not, out of respect, I did not want to butcher it. And then 12 others that were also injured. And then, of course, the whole wild goose chase for the next days until he eventually did end up taking his own life in that storage unit that we now know. It sounds like as well that his car, his Nissan, he changed the license plates on. So this was for sure this was by all means a whole calculated plan. So by far that he was like working like an assassin throughout this whole process. It's just crazy. Why he did this, we don't know yet, if we ever will. Either way, it's really sad. It's just really, really sad that two young college kids had to lose their life. This is the second attack this year so far on or another. It's not right. I'm really just trying to get tired of all this violence in politics, and it will leave up discussion for our next video, which will be on the recent violence in the last year and so on American, how it's going to arise. We'll save that for the next video. But yeah, then he went back to Massachusetts and killed the professor, and then ended up killing himself. We don't have much information about it. At least the law enforcement was able to find who it was after a long time, and with what it seemed like not good security for a college campus. Sounds like they had a lot of blind spots that Neves Valentine was able to use to his advantage, but evidently they were still able to find him, which is great. So at least hopefully the victims' families can find somewhat sort of peace in that. I also heard somewhere that the professor might have also been Jewish. So once again, that could have been just another anti-Semitic attack, which once again is still horrible that we have that in modern times, in modern day. Overall, this is just a very, very horrible, and I mean horrible situation. But enough for the Brown University shooting. So we'll get that out of the way, and that knocks out the MIT professor assassination as well. Okay, so our next story is about, which is also really another sad one. So, Hollywood director Bob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Reiner, were in fact stabbed to death and murdered in their home. And it seems more likely than not, based off what I've all seen, it was by their son, Nick Reiner, who has had a history of, drug addiction and mental health illness. This is what's really sad. They were found by their daughter, Tracy Reiner, on that morning, and the cops came and they cleared out the house and then they took the bodies. But yeah, just another sad situation. It sounds though like Nick had been into 18 different, like he's been in and out of 18 different rehab centers, as of 2016. And he was in his teenage years up into, adult years. So this family is for sure, it's no stranger to problems with the son. And possible motives, maybe he was tired of being, bossed around, having to keep going to rehab by his parents, and he snapped and ended up killing them. Who knows? With drug addiction and mental health illness, there could be many different crazy reasons why someone would want to do this. Not that they should want to. Yeah, okay, so another interesting fact about this whole situation is Nick had made a movie with his dad, which his dad had, written and directed. A movie which was kind of based off their whole family situation, the dynamic between Bob and Nick. Basically, just a movie about, a boy who was growing up with, in high school, he had bad drug addiction, and how his parents didn't really treat him right the best throughout that, and how they kept sending him to rehab, and that he didn't appreciate that. And you get to see kind of some through some of the interviews that Nick did have resentment for his parents, and it made that very apparent. Even though his parents, his mom and dad, Michelle and Bob, had both shown tough love, and trying to get him more self reliant. They had babied him, classic life. They tried everything, and it seemed like leading up to their deaths that I've heard publicly, they did seem like they were starting to get to an area where they kind of felt helpless at the situation, and they were starting to wonder, like, we've done pretty much everything we can for our son, and nothing's seeming to work. What else can we do? And they end up dying. Also, another thing that just came to me, a party before, I think Nick, had heard reported that Nick and his dad did get in an argument, which ended up having Bob leave. This was the night before he was, of course, killed, before they found his bodies. Uh, so I don't know, maybe that could have sparked his final snapping point to killing his parents. But that's all the information I have for right now, and for all these cases, all just completely tragic, devastating, things that have happened in recent times. It's just, it's sad that I have to make videos like this, and people have to make videos and reports about this stuff, because we should know better. I mean, for how much violence and how much, political violence has occurred, not just in the last year, but throughout, history and politics. We think somewhere by now we might find a way to resolve that, but I think the sad part is there's always going to be violence. Should there be? No. But I think somewhere there's always going to end up being violence. Of course, some of this wasn't political, like the Rainer stuff, but the other stuff was very much political, or just sad mass shootings. But yeah, just not good. The violence is not good, And like the whole MIT and the Brown University, it just shows we let immigrants like this into our country, and visa, eventually getting legal citizenship. For a while there, he was just on a visa, and who knows when that expired. We let immigrants like this into our country, dangerous immigrants, and they do crazy stuff like rape and murder girls, or kill innocent college students, or kill National Guard members at DC. This was Trump's whole point in deporting them, because they are a problem for our country, for our system, and just all this violence, all this pain. We've had enough. We've had enough. We just need to find a way to come to common thread. Stop with this discourse. It's not good. Anyways, to close out, thank you guys for watching. If you want to stay up to update with my videos, of course, subscribe, of course, and hit that notification bell to be updated on when you will see my next video. Like the video to support me, of course. Do everything you can, or that you're willing to do. But once again, this was Shane, the hosted. My name is Shane Fetterman. I am hosting Principled, a new podcast on Patriots Principles. So without further ado, we shall tune to the end.